I love that intro. Welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BETONLINE. I am your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I am excited to talk about ye old Denver Nuggets and perhaps their kryptonite heading into the 2024-25 season, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Really appreciate everybody for stopping by. Really appreciate everybody for hanging out. I see DJ Seahawk in the chat. Love this intro for real, for real. He says the music and images are beautiful. Thank you, my guy. I made that myself. Doing my best to continue to improve. Hope everybody's having a great Tuesday night. This is going to be a podcast all about the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Denver Nuggets, and I think it will be a good one. I think it's one that Nuggets fans, frankly, need to know. When I was talking about this podcast and just that I was going to do it earlier, it was interesting to hear somebody say, truth hurts sometimes. And what I was saying is that Nuggets may not have improved enough to take down the Timberwolves, and the truth might hurt about that. We will get into all of the details for sure. I look forward to hearing out the arguments from the audience if they present themselves. I'm very curious to see what everybody else has to say about the Timberwolves. And when Denver was about as close as you could possibly get to winning that series back in May, and neither team has really changed too terribly much, at least not fundamentally. Really quick, this podcast, as you know, is brought to you by our good folks over at BetOnline, the number one source for everything football. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on their $200,000 MegaContest and pick 5 games against the spread every single week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of the $200K. When the game's over, head on over to their online casino to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. Really interesting to see everybody's survivor pools in the NFL, actually. It has been a very weird season. The Baltimore Ravens are 0-2. The Denver Broncos, same exact thing, are 0-2, unfortunately. So hopefully both teams bounce back, but especially the Broncos. Would love to see them have some positivity here. For all of our Broncos coverage, by the way, make sure to go check out everything that Troy Rank, that our guys over at the Mile High Sports Today show are doing here on the Mile High Sports YouTube channel. Just scroll over to the Denver Broncos tab on Mile High Sports, and you'll be able to get everything in the playlist, all of our coverage on the Denver Broncos. It has been very, very good. Cody Rourke also, by the way. Obviously, Cody has been fantastic with his film breakdowns. Okay. Let's get into this. I want to talk about the Timberwolves. This is a continuation of the 20Q series. This is the 9th edition of the 20Q series for this upcoming season, and one that I think people are going to be reluctant to hear, or maybe they'll be like, yeah, this is quite literally exactly what happened, and quite literally a problem for this Nuggets team. The Timberwolves remain very, very good. I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about some of the changes that they've made, some of the changes that the Nuggets may have made, and just why they presented such an issue for the Nuggets last season in the first segment. They have the same projected starting lineup, same projected 6th man and 7th man heading into the season. You've got Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert. Off the bench, they have the 6th man of the year in Naz Reid, who was tremendous and did some important things for that team throughout the season and into the playoffs. And then you've got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who was always he kind of had his breakout against the Nuggets in the playoffs in 2023, then had a tremendous season for Minnesota last year. Wasn't awesome in the Nuggets series. I think he was sort of a bellwether for whether Denver could win that series or not. Ultimately, they didn't win it, but I think they figured out how to sort of navigate what Nickeil Alexander-Walker was providing. And then there are 3 main additions to Minnesota this year. You've got Rob Dillingham, the rookie that they traded up for with the 8th overall pick. You have Joe Ingles, who is a veteran forward now, who's probably not going to play a whole bunch, but probably going to fill in their Kyle Anderson role. And then PJ Dozier, who is, I think, another kind of funhouse version of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They don't have Kyle Anderson anymore. They don't have Monte Morris, and they're expecting growth from Leonard Miller, who was a draft pick that they had a couple years ago, and then Jaden McDaniels, and even Anthony Edwards, who's going to have his age 23 season coming up, which is insane. Like, he's already been in the league. This will be his 5th season, and he has grown as much as humanly possible in that time. So will be really interesting to see what happens here. Also, don't really discount the difference between age 22 Anthony Edwards and age 23 Anthony Edwards. Like, especially, he went to the Olympics, has had a whole bunch of life experience and playing experience now, and those kinds of things we've seen for the Nuggets from their perspective. Jokic had a big, massive leap from, I think, sort of his age 23 to 24 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. And sometimes it can just go very quickly for guys, and especially if you get that kind of experience. So I'm curious to see what happens with him. You could say the same thing for age 28 to age 29, Karl-Anthony Towns. Towns has really figured some stuff out, and the more confident he gets in himself, the more he can slow his own game down, the more, like, just the better he's going to be, the more capable he's going to be. So I'm curious to see what it looks like there. Jaden McDaniels will probably be more consistent on both ends. Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, they'll probably slow down, but are they going to slow down enough to counteract some of those other things that Minnesota's got going on? I don't know. Now, what problems did Minnesota give to Denver last season? I highlighted 3 specific things. Number one, they took turns guarding Jokic and Murray with elite defenders on pretty much every single possession. Jokic faced off against Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Naz Reid pretty much every single possession. The year before, he kind of took advantage of facing Kyle Anderson a little bit more frequently. That didn't happen this time around. Jokic was dealing with a big, strong, athletic player at all times, and that, I think, wore him down over the course of the series. And then Jamal Murray, obviously, this is well documented, between Anthony Edwards, who actually started on him, and then Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That is one of the best perimeter trios that you could see defensively of all time, like pretty close to it. I think OKC is going to actually rival that in some ways this year, but it's just an absolute menace to play those 3. And the year before, he took advantage of Austin Rivers and Jordan McLaughlin and guys that were just lesser defenders. The times when he got Mike Conley on him this year, he didn't fully take advantage of it either, because he's a little bit banged up, a little bit hurt, just not as good as I think you would hope for. Perhaps this next season will be a better year for Jamal Murray, but it's not going to change the fact that he's going to be facing Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Anthony Edwards. And on top of that, you got to drive into the teeth of the defense that's captained by Rudy Gobert. It's a tough place to be. Second thing that was a big problem for Denver, Denver's starting lineup had no real Anthony Edwards defender. KCP was the sacrificial lamb. He was not very good. He allowed over 50% to Ant, and Ant was just killing Denver left, right, and center. Aaron Gordon was better. Christian Brown was best. He was the best option that Denver had on a consistent basis there. Cedric asks in the chat, is CB always going to be on Ant every game, Ryan? I don't think so. I think he'll be the main answer, but I do think that the interesting thing about Anthony Edwards is he was able to hunt a lot of mismatches, and that's sort of the name of the game in today's NBA. Unless Christian Brown can avoid getting switched in all of those cases, there are going to be switches that happen, and sometimes it's going to be Jamal that has to guard him. Sometimes it's going to be Mike that has to guard him. And that was not good. It was actually really, really bad. Both of those guys were absolutely abused by Ant in the playoffs on switches, and Jokic somehow did better than both of them. Like, that should not happen. The other thing that I remember from that series, Peyton Watson According to the matchup data on NBA.com, he spent a total of 20 seconds guarding Anthony Edwards in the playoffs. Because Peyton Watson was not able to survive offensively, he wasn't shooting well, the Nuggets could not deploy him defensively. That is something that we'll have to watch going forward. Well, then the last thing, like there's just too many defensive weaknesses for Denver, but the last thing that really hurt them in the Minnesota series was Michael Porter Jr. just disappeared on both ends. Jaden McDaniels outplayed him. He held MPJ to 10.7 points per game, 49.5 true shooting percentage, 4.8% assist rate. Like, that is just horrible. And I think it's important to understand that MPJ had a horrible moment. It was after a great moment against the LA Lakers, by the way. I think he can bounce back from that. I don't see any reason why he can't bounce back from that. But there are some high leverage points in time where he has really struggled against teams that can really get out on him on the perimeter. The Portland Trailblazers series back in 2021, the Suns series in 2021, the Miami Heat series in 2023 in the NBA Finals, and then this series are ones where I would say, yeah, best case perimeter defenders in those situations, that can be a tough one. So I have a solution for that, and I'll talk about it later, but it's going to involve some lineup shifting. So we'll see what happens. Will last year's problems, Jokic and Murray taking turns being guarded by the elite core that Minnesota had, Denver's starting lineup not having a true ant defender, and MPJ absolutely being horrible, will those problems sustain in a playoff matchup this year? Let's talk about it on the other side. When we come back, we will chat about those things as well as some of Denver's roster changes and how they are impacted through a Minnesota lens. We will be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we're back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Would really appreciate it. Okay. Second segment here, Denver's roster changes through a Minnesota lens. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is out. I didn't upload this particular graphic, but I have a stat that is in my article from earlier today, which if you missed it, then it was on basically Denver's odds for win-loss totals, things like that. There's an interesting stat that over the past 2 years, regular season and playoffs, the Nuggets starting five has 2,300 minutes played together. The next closest lineup is Sacramento's lineup with 1,600. That is De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis. A solid lineup. Not anything to write home about, but a solid group. The next closest lineup after that has 900 minutes played together. I am not kidding. The top three lineups in the entire NBA over the course of the last 2 years, 2,300 minutes, 1,600 minutes, 900 minutes. 900 is less than half. Denver has a lot that they have put into their top starting five over the course of the last 2 years. KCP is obviously a big part of that. He is now gone. In his place is Christian Braun, what we assume to be Christian Braun. Ant didn't struggle last year when being guarded by Christian Braun in the playoffs, but he did have less of an impact. It was the matchup where Ant was least good on a consistent basis. Denver was able to put a guy in Christian Braun out there that didn't foul him a ton, was very disciplined, was athletic enough that he could stick with him, and strong enough that he didn't get bullied by him. It's a good matchup for Christian Braun. Now, Brown's numbers in that Minnesota series paint a different picture offensively. In nearly 20 minutes, he averaged 6 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, and 0.9 combined steals and blocks. Not enough usage, not enough activity, not enough like involvement in what Denver was trying to do. Most of the time, he's just trying to get out of the way of what the Nuggets are primarily doing. But if he is a starting shooting guard for the Nuggets next year, it cannot be that low. He shot 15 of 32 from the field in that 7-game series, which is solid. And then he shot 4 of 9 from 3, which is also solid. So nearly 50% from the field and 44% from 3 is like, if you told me that he did that on moderate volume, Denver wins that series and doesn't lose it. Now, I don't expect those shooting numbers to hold up because teams are going to game plan for him. They're going to learn his strengths and weaknesses, and CB's going to have to improve. He's going to have to be better than he was previous year. So I am very, very curious to see what he puts out there and how his presence would impact this particular series. But it's going to be on him to improve. Now, KCP did not have a good series against the Minnesota Timberwolves. He was a little bit better from a volume standpoint, but he didn't shoot the ball super efficiently. So let's call that a wash. The exchange between KCP and Christian Braun, let's call that even for what the Nuggets are expecting from a starting lineup caliber player. And that is, like, I think pretty generous to Christian Braun because KCP was pretty solid within his role, but just didn't have as good of a series. So I think let's call it even for now. We'll see where we get to by the end of this thing. Now, the other main trade outs that the Nuggets did for this upcoming year, Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric are in. Reggie Jackson and Justin Holiday are out. Those are the main, I think, playoff caliber trade-in, trade-outs that you're expecting. Reggie Jackson averaged 9.4 minutes per game, 3.7 points, and had 5 assists and 6 turnovers in 7 games. Outside of some brief moments in that series, he was bad. He was not good, and he could not shoot very efficiently from inside the arc. Now, can Russ improve upon that? Can Russell Westbrook be better than that? I actually don't know because Russ shot 26% in the playoffs. That is worse than what Reggie Jackson did. It's not much worse because Reggie was also bad, but I don't want to sit here and pretend that Russell Westbrook is going to be perfectly good in that Reggie Jackson role because we don't know. Think about this. Russ shot 26% of the playoffs against the Minnesota Timberwolves, or the Dallas Mavericks, with Maxi Kleber as his primary defender. Now, Kleber, when he's locked in, is a pretty solid player, but we're talking about Kleber versus Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, Naz Reid, a couple of different level of players physically. And against Minnesota, he's either going to be guarded by those bigs where they cross-match a little bit because they don't respect his jumper, or he's probably going to get either Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Anthony Edwards. And, like, I don't know, man. That doesn't seem like a great idea to me. He's going to have, like, if he has Mike Conley, maybe that's a little bit different. Maybe he can be a little bit more physical, get to a place where he's like athletically finishing. But I think Minnesota would bait him into that. I think they'd want him to try to take over, and I don't think that's what's best for the team. Let's say that's a Murray, Westbrook, Michael Porter, Peyton Watson, Nikola Jokic lineup. 3 of your main starters, 1 primary defender, and then Russ. Versus Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert. They're 6th and 7th man, along with 3 of their starters. Gobert probably guards Jokic in that situation. Naz Reid probably guards Peyton Watson. Jaden McDaniels probably guards MPJ. Ant probably guards Jamal Murray, I would expect, which leads Nickeil Alexander-Walker to guard Russ. That doesn't necessarily feel like a matchup that you're going to want to attack. You know what I mean? So, like, how much of a benefit is it actually to Denver for him to be out there? I don't know the answer to that. I hope it's great. I hope he bounces back, and I hope he's efficient, and I hope he makes good decisions. But do you want him to take over in those situations? I kind of lean no. So let's call Reggie for Russ a wash as well, and kind of an even trade between what Reggie was doing and what we expect Russ to do in this situation. I don't want to be offensive to Russ. His fans are probably going to come after me for that. But this playoffs run that he had against the Dallas Mavericks was very scary. So he'll be better with Jokic as his primary guy. How much better, I don't know. Other kind of trade-ins, trade-outs. Justin Holiday averaged about 16 minutes a game. He shot 50% from three. He was a solid switch defender. He was really good in that series. It wasn't like unbelievable the entire time, but there were games that he helped win, including game 3 and game 4 against the T-Wolves on the road. It was very, very good. The Nuggets are going big at that position, and they're going to put Julian Strawther out there instead. I am already going to say that in a Minnesota series, I kind of expect them to hunt Strawther defensively. I would expect them to stay attached to him offensively. And that is the first playoff run for a young player that has offensive responsibility. Usually those don't go well. So I kind of lean like Holiday for Strawther. I kind of lean that is a downgrade for the Minnesota series. Now, the other value adds, players that we haven't really talked about. Denver did not play any bigs. If you go and look at the playoff stats for the series, I think Peyton Watson played 30 total minutes, and a lot of that was garbage time. And I think Zeke Naji played entirely garbage time. DeAndre Jordan played entirely garbage time. There was never a real moment where Denver had another big on the floor outside of Jokic and Aaron Gordon. And Aaron Gordon you could classify as a forward. So they are planning on probably playing Dario Saric and Peyton Watson a little bit more. Now, Peyton Watson's not a big. He may not even be a forward. He might be a wing, but he's 6'8", and that size does really help. Dario Saric, I believe, is 6'10". So we found out that Watson was too skinny to guard karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, guys like that. He shot 0 of 7 from the field. It was not a good end of the year for Peyton Watson. I'm expecting him to be better because it has to be better. He's probably the best ant defender on the team, even better than Christian Brown because of his physical traits, his length, and his athleticism. And he also has really great defense and like intensity and instincts on the ball. So I think that there would be some good things in allowing Peyton Watson to guard Ant, and that's a guy that you could throw out there on him and feel pretty good about. Now, will Ant still score? Sure. But I think it's a really good option for Denver. Can he survive offensively to be out there to guard Ant? I don't know. Probably not. But if he's going to develop the way that we hope he can, Denver's going to have to try and see about that in the regular season. And so we'll probably have a better picture of whether he can survive offensively after this upcoming regular season. Could he replace MPJ in some lineups where you need a little bit more defense, you need fewer weaknesses out there? Sure. Could he replace Aaron Gordon in situations where, you know how often the Timberwolves were just leaving Aaron Gordon open and having Rudy Gobert roam off of him and help on Jokic and Murray and guys like that. Like, if you don't have Aaron Gordon out there in some of those situations and you have Peyton Watson instead, maybe they respect Peyton Watson's jumper a little bit more. I don't know. That is on Peyton Watson entirely to prove that. So that's at least something that I could see. You could also, by the way, go Murray, Strawther, Brown, MPJ, Jokic, put MPJ at the 4 and get that spacing by force. That leaves you vulnerable defensively, but Denver might have to do that against Minnesota. Like, they may not be able to score enough. Offense was the problem in this last playoff run. So something to think about. Back to Saric. He is a solid offensive player and would help in some of the non-Jokic lineups. I very much doubt that he and Jokic can play together at the same time. Although if there was a team that they could do it against, a team that has Rudy Gobert and plays a second big feels reasonable. They also could have like Saric guard Jaden McDaniels and have Jokic guard Gobert and have Aaron Gordon or somebody like that guard karl-anthony Towns. That would not surprise me, and that way you get one of the bigs off of Cat, and then you force a guy like Jaden McDaniels to beat you, which you probably could, but might be a better situation. You can have Saric doing some non-Jokic lineup stuff where he's pick and popping with Murray, where he's DHOing with Murray, setting the table for MPJ, Strother. Maybe he's got some chemistry with Russ that he can explore. I also could see playing Saric and AG together so that you have more size with that second unit. It's one of the things that Denver lacked, obviously, last year in the playoffs. When they went to those non-Jokic lineups, they could not really survive. I could see them surviving for 6 minutes with Saric and AG out there because you've got enough size and you've got enough strength and you've got enough playmaking and versatility that I think you could make it work. But that is wishful thinking, of course. So we're going to find out. We are going to find out for sure. Can Saric hold up defensively? Probably not. But if you surround him with other strong defenders, then maybe. What if you get a Murray, Brown, Watson, AG, Saric lineup? It's basically your three best defenders along with Murray. I could see that working. So with playing Watson and Saric a little bit more frequently, that's a value add for Denver. I would consider that an upgrade for a Minnesota-specific series because Denver, yes, they needed spacing. Yes, they needed shooting last year, but they needed strength and size just as much. And so if you play Watson and Saric there, that gives you that. So I lean upgrade there. So between those four, you had KCP going to Christian Brown. You had Justin Holiday going to Julian Strother. You had Reggie Jackson going to Russell Westbrook. And then you had no size going to some size in Peyton Watson and Dario Saric. I have the final tally at 1 upgrade, 1 downgrade, and 2 kind of even wash differences there. Through that exercise, I think it's important for everybody to realize that Minnesota is just a very, very dangerous team. Like really, really dangerous. They are probably Denver's most challenging foe in the West. I think that OKC is the better team. I do. And yet I still think that Minnesota is the most dangerous to Denver specifically because OKC, even though they have a whole bunch of dangerous pieces, they can go 5 out, they can go with Chet at the 5, and they can really space out Jokic. They could also play 2 bigs and have Isaiah Hartenstein guard him and have Chet roaming. I still think that Minnesota's more dangerous at doing that, and they are the more physical, hard-nosed team that seems to do well against Denver. Other teams that go finesse, Denver just grinds them into dust. Minnesota grinds Denver into dust, and that is, I think, still a scary thing for the Nuggets and Nuggets fans. That's something the Nuggets are going to have to figure out over the course of this next 82 games that they're going to play. And if they don't have a better answer than what they have now on their roster, I think I might pick Minnesota. Obviously, I leave that up for interpretation because injuries could change things. Maybe one team's playing better at the right time. Maybe, yeah, like I said, injuries could happen, and maybe it's Anthony Edwards that is dealing with a injury this time around, and unlike Jamal Murray, and that could really obviously change matters. So I don't know. I think that Minnesota, if you just put these two teams against each other, I think Minnesota's better head up. And that is a scary thing, especially if you say that against another team in the Western Conference and you're worried about avoiding them in a playoff bracket, that could be tough. So we'll see what happens with Denver. I don't think that they can go into this year's playoffs thinking, oh yeah, we'll play anybody, because I don't think that they are above and beyond anybody else in the West, or everybody else, I should say. There's a lot of teams that they are way better than, but Minnesota is not one of them. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to chat about is this a rivalry or not? We'll wrap up with that because I think rivalries are mostly dead in the NBA. This one I think is kicking up into gear. We'll be right back. All right, final segment, Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Appreciate all the love and support on the podcast. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really appreciate it. Let me take you down memory lane real quick. 2018, game 82 of the season, Jimmy Butler and Karl-Anthony Towns going up against a young Jokic and Murray. They ultimately get the best of the Nuggets while Minnesota's at home. Although Jokic and Murray both played pretty well in that game, Jokic especially, and it really set up Denver for the long run. That they had that experience where they really needed to know how good they were, and they ultimately found out. The next year, 2019, Jimmy Butler had a ugly exodus from Minnesota, and then Minnesota was sad for that entire time. Sorry, Cedric, I missed your question earlier. My fault. He asks, does this still apply if we utilize Saric Jokic against their Twin Tower lineup? Does it still apply? We'll see what happens. But Saric Jokic, I think, is too unathletic to match up truly well with the Minnesota front line. They are strong athletically, they are strong defensively, and they have enough skill that they can really make it difficult for Denver. Saric and Jokic, like, it's too slow. It's just too unathletic. Maybe I will see differently when I get to watch Saric in person, but I just don't think that the version of Saric that you get in October and November is going to be as athletic and as like in prime physical condition as you're going to need in April, May, and June. So that's another factor. Okay, back to it. 2018, Denver loses game 82 to the Timberwolves. 2019, Jimmy Butler has the exodus. The Wolves are sad. They're pretty bad in that situation. And that was when Denver first really started taking off. It looked like these two teams were going different directions, and they were. 2020, the Wolves were even sadder. They were bad. And that was also the pandemic year. It was also the year after that they were able to draft Anthony Edwards. In 2021, yes, the Wolves were bad, but Anthony Edwards was still a player that I think they were excited about, that didn't necessarily know exactly what it would turn into, but he clearly had talent. 2022, Denver missing MPJ and Jamal Murray. They dropped down to a 6 seed. Minnesota was a 7 seed. They popped up and they really were moving up on Denver and started to figure some things out with Chris Finch. Patrick Beverley was there to help kind of guide that team, and they made a play-in appearance, ultimately lost to the Memphis Grizzlies, but it still felt like they were going to be around. 2023, they were around, but Denver was even better. Denver wins that first round series, although I think to a man, everybody said that Minnesota was the most challenging team that they faced from a toughness, a skill, and like actual threat to upset perspective. And Denver felt like Minnesota was the best team. And that looked prophetic from this last year in 2024, where the Wolves win and they stop the Nuggets from winning the championship in a year where many considered Denver to at least be co-favorites. And so it has felt like this has kind of gone back and forth with Minnesota. They had a lull, obviously, in 2019, 2020, and 2021. But then you get Anthony Edwards, you get him up to speed, and you get a better support cast around him. Karl-Anthony Towns moves to like a second or third best player role. And it feels like Denver's on par, or even maybe now behind the Minnesota Timberwolves. What will 2025 look like with these two? The Wolves fans think that this is their year. They drafted Rob Dillingham, who's a Kentucky guard rookie, very exciting, and they basically add him to a group that was already a Western Conference Finals team this last year. Denver, I think, and Nuggets fans are uncertain, but they do know that Jokic is the best player in the world, and you can do anything when you have the best player in the world on the team. If these two teams meet in 2025, there will be bad blood, excuse me. If the Nuggets and Timberwolves meet in 2025, there will be some ugliness. There will be some bad blood for sure. The Nuggets absolutely remember Jaden McDaniels throwing down a windmill after the game was effectively done, as well as Ant dancing on their grave, basically. Game 7 on the road for Minnesota in Denver. It was an ugly scene, and Nuggets fans don't have any love lost for this Minnesota team at this point. And Nuggets fans, the Nuggets don't either. I think that if you talk to anybody in that locker room that was there last year, they want some revenge. They want, like, the way that Minnesota sort of comported themselves, the way that things happened. It definitely felt like Denver gave up some stuff and Minnesota took clear advantage of some weaknesses in Denver. And I think the Nuggets don't believe that that was them. They believe that they are better than that. They believe that they didn't put out the best version of themselves. And I also think that they want some revenge. Can they do anything about it? Can they want revenge and actually act that out? Murray could be healthier this time around. Michael Porter, probably hard to be worse than he was. So if he was better, then maybe there's an opportunity there. And then Jokic, I think, is a memory of an elephant. He knows that Ant and those guys were dancing around. They were very, very excited, and as they should. They're a largely young team around Anthony Edwards. So either way, Denver's going to be out for blood. They honestly will be. They are very, very excited and want to make a statement. It's pretty clear to me. If these two teams match up, there will be fireworks. And if the Nuggets win, the Wolves will be devastated. If the Wolves win, the Nuggets will be devastated. So is this a rivalry? I think so. I think at this point it clearly is. And is it one of the better rivalries of the entire NBA at this point? Yeah, I would say so. I think the Lakers and Celtics thing is more a thing between Lakers and Celtics fans. But between teams out there, I think you could say Phoenix and Dallas have really long gone at it. But I honestly think that between Denver and Minnesota, these two teams have been together enough. And then you just add in the Rudy Gobert from Utah, who's had battles with Denver, obviously. Mike Conley, obviously. Tim Connolly. Did I say Mike Conley? Mike Conley. Tim Connolly going from Denver to Minnesota, and then Chris Finch going from Denver to Minnesota in a roundabout way. It only fans the flames. Like, there's so many connections here, so many different reasons to think that, yeah, this means a lot to a lot of people. And now that Denver won once in 2023 in the playoffs and Minnesota won once in 2024, I would expect 2025 to be pretty serious between these two. All right, folks, I think that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. Really appreciate you stopping by. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I should be back on Thursday. Nuggets, actually, I didn't really talk about this earlier. The Nuggets had their uniforms leaked for their City Edition uniforms. I don't like them. They're pretty blah, pretty meh. I wouldn't necessarily want to wear them if I were a Nuggets player. And hopefully they look a little bit better than how they show up on the graphics. But I could absolutely see people being pretty disappointed with the way that the City Edition uniforms look this year. But yeah, I look forward to seeing what happens going forward. The Nuggets Media Day is in 9 days. Today's September 17th. It's on September 26th. That's going to be something. So we'll be very excited to tap back into Nuggets coverage in person. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. I will talk to you guys very soon.